east, bringing milder air, but also, well, increasing the wind, picking up some rainfall and leading to a generally breezy and damp day in the northwest. Those outbreaks of rain pushing into eastern Scotland, southern Scotland during the morning. The fog in central and southern parts of the UK slow to clear, but eventually once they do clear, beautiful spells of sunshine once again for much of England and Wales. 5, 6, 7 Celsius, similar to Friday's temperatures. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, well, it's turning increasingly windy, and with the cloud, the wind, the spells of mainly light rain, it's going to feel quite cold, even if temperatures are technically higher than they have been for the last few days. Gales around some western and northern exposed coastal areas in Scotland, and then heavier and more persistent rain arriving during the night tonight. But with the cloud also edging further eastwards overnight, it's a frost-free start for Western England, for Wales, for Scotland and Northern Ireland, even if it is a breezy, cloudy and, in places, damp start to the day. A complete contrast for the East Midlands, East Anglia, the southeast of England. Here, frost and fog once again. But once the fog clears, plenty of sunshine actually towards the southeast. It's another chilly day, 3 or 4 Celsius typically, whilst across the rest of the UK, well, the further northwest you are, the milder it will be. 10, 11 Celsius possible for parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Further outbreaks of rain at times, mainly across the north of the UK, increasingly cloudy elsewhere, but we keep the relatively chilly air in the southeast.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello and good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday morning with Esther and Phil, and we've got an exciting show coming up for you today.
David Davis will be joining us to warn Conservative MPs against agitating for a return of Boris Johnson.
We always read out our viewers' comments, and we'll continue to do so, but we want to go one step further this week, and we'll be having some of our viewers join us live on the show. And also joining us on the show today is Kevin Woodford and Carol Malone.
And I will be revealing some new statistics which might just shock you, so don't go away and miss that. But first, here's all the latest news headlines with Aaron.
Morning, it is 10:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The co-founder of the bus firm Stagecoach, Dame Anne Gloag, has been charged in connection with a human trafficking investigation. Police Scotland say 4 individuals, understood to be members of her family, were charged on Thursday in connection with alleged human trafficking and immigration offences. A statement issued on her behalf says Ms Gloag denies the malicious allegations made against her and her family. A senior Labour MP has described the Prime Minister as ridiculous after he was given a fixed penalty notice by police for failing to wear a seatbelt. Rishi Sunak has apologised for the incident, which happened while he was filming a social media clip earlier this week. His spokesman says the Prime Minister made an error of judgment and he will comply with the fine of up to £500. The Shadow Financial Secretary, though, James Murray, says Mr Sunak has lost control.
Just when you thought the Conservatives couldn't get any more ridiculous, Rishi Sunak shows that he can't even fasten his own seatbelt. And I think this speaks volumes about the fact that the Prime Minister is not in control. And compare Keir Starmer with Rishi Sunak. You know, Keir Starmer has been at the World Economic Forum this week, promoting the UK, promoting our plan for economic growth, and Rishi Sunak can't fasten his own seatbelt. I think people will make their own judgment about who's best to lead the country.
James Murray there. However, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says Rishi Sunak is merely a human being who made a mistake.
The Prime Minister put his hand straight up. It was a mistake. He's apologised for it. He takes responsibility for it. He hasn't actually gone down that path of blaming anyone else. He's taken responsibility for it and he'll pay the fine. He's a human as well as a incredibly busy politician, the Prime Minister. He's got a frantic, hectic schedule, but he's made it clear there's no excuses.
And Mr Raab has been defending another of his colleagues, Nadeem Zahawi, after fresh questions were raised over his tax affairs. Dominic Raab told GB News he's confident Mr Zahawi's been transparent after he was accused of paying a penalty as part of a multi-million-pound settlement with HMRC. Labour have called on Mr Zahawi to explain himself after it was reported he paid a 7-figure sum to end the dispute. Mr Zahawi's team has been contacted for comment and he has previously said his taxes were properly declared and paid in the UK. Western allies have failed to reach an agreement to provide German-made tanks to Ukraine, which are being urgently requested to counter Russia's planned spring offensive. The US and its allies met yesterday and did agree to send more NATO weaponry to Ukraine, but Germany remains reluctant to provide its Leopard tanks or allow other countries to donate theirs, despite increasing pressure to do so. However, Ukraine's defence minister says his forces will train on Leopard tanks in Poland in what he claims is a breakthrough. Former Health Secretary Sajid Javid says charging patients for their GP and A&E appointments is crucial to the survival of the NHS. Speaking to The Times, Mr Javid said it would help the NHS ration its finite supply more effectively. Mr Javid also said the appreciation for the health service has become a religious fervour and a barrier to reform. Meanwhile, new figures show average waits for NHS dental treatment in Scotland have increased in 12 health boards since 2019. Scottish Liberal Democrats found one patient had to wait over 3 years for outpatient treatment. The Scottish Government says they are working on addressing the backlog created by the pandemic. Counter-terrorism police have arrested a man after he was allegedly seen with a suspicious package and a suspected firearm at a hospital maternity ward. Wards at the St James's Hospital in Leeds were evacuated after the suspect was detained on the suspicion of terrorism offences. Police say they are treating it as an isolated incident and there's no evidence of ongoing risk to the public. And the US national and state officials have now stepped up their efforts to find the British actor who's gone missing in the Californian mountains. Julian Sands was reported missing last week in San Gabriel Mountains, north of Los Angeles. Mobile phone forensics are now being used to help pinpoint his location. The County Sheriff's Department says there's still no date set for calling off the efforts. The incident is still being considered a search and rescue operation. And this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, but now it is back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Aaron. Now to take a look at the papers today. We're delighted to be joined in the studio by Daily Express columnist Carol Malone and celebrity chef Kevin Woodford. Great to have you here with us. Do you want to start, Carol?
What? You want me to say what the story I want to talk about?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to talk about the splash on the Mail today, front page story, and it's Rosie Duffield saying that Labour has a woman problem, and I'm really glad she's spoken out. It takes a lot of guts. I nearly said a bad word there. It takes a lot of guts to come out and say this, especially in the Labour Party. She has been abused for quite a long time for her views on transgender. And Rosie Duffield has made it quite clear, we should treat transgender people with compassion, absolutely. But what she's saying is men who self-ID as women should not be allowed into safe women's spaces. And she's absolutely correct on that. And this week in the Commons, I don't know whether you guys saw it, she was jeered and heckled and frankly menaced by her own side. And one of the guys who was doing this is a guy called Lloyd Russell Moyle. I don't know whether you've come across this man. He's the same man who this week went to a trans protest with two other Labour MPs. And I mean, let's name them, Olivia Blake and Nadia Whittome. And they were speaking on and sharing a platform with a trans activist called Sarah Jane Baker, who has been in prison for 30 years for attempted murder and for torture and kidnap. And these three people went on to support her. And she also said on stage, this woman, with these people close to, these Labour MPs close to her, she actually said that she wanted to get to Parliament and all those people who helped her, she would then take them off for a party and they'd all take drugs. Now, this is the kind of people that these Labour MPs who are rushing to promote their woke credentials are supporting. And this week they have heckled one of their own. Rosie Duffield is very sad story to read today. She actually said she feels ostracised by her own party. She feels like she doesn't belong in her own party. She's not the only one. But this guy, Russell Moyles, in Parliament this week, he also, while this debate was going on, he went up, he moved his seat in the Commons to sit next to another female MP and was staring her out in her face. And this is bullying.
And Rosie also said, didn't she, that she didn't feel that she could turn to the leader of the party and get any support. So here's somebody who was a single mum, worked her way up the ranks, won a seat at a Conservative seat. She said there was nobody to turn to, failing bullied.
I think the key thing here, Carl, I think you're absolutely right about how brave Rosie Duffield is, because actually it takes a lot of guts to speak out about this. And the thing that people, might not appreciate, the House of Commons, it is a club. Yeah. It is a club. And the whole system is designed to grind you down and to fit in and to conform and all the rest of it. And it is that kind of place. And I know that as somebody who's, probably the most rebellious Conservative MP. I know how difficult it can be sometimes. And so for her to hold her ground pretty much alone in the Labour Party and stand up and say this, it really does take
You can imagine what is happening
guts.
to her on the sidelines as well, can't you? This is going to become Labour's anti-Semitism problem, I think.
But there's also a serious hypocrisy with the whole thing,
Because the degree of bullying that he showed, I thought, during that particular speech was horrific. I mean, he should have been called right out for it, completely out for it, And they talk about bullying across the Conservatives and elsewhere, but my goodness,
to be fair,
that was so evident.
The Deputy Speaker, Rosie Winterton, did tell him he needed to calm down. But like you say, I think as Carol said,
Philip, that shouldn't be necessary. With an issue like that.
He then went over to stare at Miriam Cates, who made the speech.
Absolutely.
But there's a massive problem in Parliament, full stop now, on the floor of the House. It's meant to be the place that you can debate, that you can say different things. And she was not saying anything controversial.
No,
she was standing up for 50% of the public. So you can imagine if you're trying to raise any other issues, big problem. And that does need to be sorted.
Kevin,
I believe with
what have you got?
No, absolutely.
What have you got for us?
Well, there's been an awful lot going on this week, hasn't there, about, this is just nonsense. You can't eat cake, you can't eat meat up in Edinburgh, for goodness sake. Edinburgh, I mean, it's the home of gastronomy, isn't it? It's where tatties and mince was invented and chicken tikka masala, And I thought I should talk about that because it's to do with health. But then I saw a story that I thought was more pertinent and more worrying, and that is that the number of young men now addicted to anabolic steroids is phenomenal. Used to be 50,000. They reckon it's 500,000 now. Now there's a dichotomy within that in terms of there's the young people that have got sort of body dysmorphia and they think they're not strong enough, they're not big enough, and they need to build themselves up, and so consequently they're taking the tablets. But allegedly, the main reason for this increase in this particular problem, and it is a problem because it's a Class C drug, right, that has to be, obtained by prescription. It's addictive. It has all sorts of medical sort of problems associated with it. Allegedly, it's programs such as Love Island that are causing the problem. And you know what? I look at Philip and I think we've got the perfect body shape.
Kevin, this is all natural.
I think we are, seriously.
I know it's difficult to believe, but this is all natural. No steroids were involved.
Do you know what? Every time I strip off at night to get into bed...
Lots of fast food, though. Lots of fast food.
But when I strip off at night, every night, my wife laughs. No, she laughed, and I wouldn't want her not to laugh. I would not.
There's something about quick everything here, isn't it? There's fast food, want to do this, don't cook, do it. But this steroids is fast body. How can we get whatever? How can we pretend? We are in the world of pretend at the moment.
Well, you talk about Love Island. There's a story in one of the papers saying that it's a guy who does hair transplants and hair treatments for men.
We're speaking to him later.
We
are speaking to him later on the show.
But it is about the rise, whether you call it vanity, but it is the rise.
It's more than that, Esther.
Do you think?
I think it's a vanity that is fuelled by mental health problems. It causes mental health problems. It causes this body dysmorphia that we're all talking about. But go back to what Kevin was talking about the cake story. I mean, that really got my goat. Because Susan Jebb, who most people have probably never heard of, she's now a laughingstock in the country. She's the head of she's the boss of the Food Standards Agency. Let me just point out, this woman earns 70 grand for a 2.5 to 3 day week, right? And she comes out with pronouncements like, cake is just... Taking cake into the office, so we bring a bit in here, is just as dangerous to your colleagues as passive smoking. I mean, I thought this was a joke. I thought it was April the 1st. This is just... And she talks about how she wouldn't eat cake if people didn't bring it into the office. Well, that's about willpower, love. That's not about anything else.
Correct.
If you're watching your weight, don't eat cake.
She's doing 2.5 days a week. Is that too many? Is that now too many with pronouncements like this?
But the interesting thing about that, Carol, is the fact that by bringing a little bit of cake into the office, the motivational sort of lift on that for everybody is phenomenal. It is phenomenal, really, So no.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
No.
And Carol, have you got another story there?
Yes, I wanted to talk about Sunak. Rishi Sunak. He's been fined now. He's had a fixed penalty notice for £100, which he absolutely should have because he broke the law. There's no question. However, I just think that the meal the left are making of this is astonishing. This is the latest thing. Yes, he was dumb to make that little video thing in the car, but he didn't kill anyone. And Lancashire police made a very serious statement afterwards. We are investigating. Well, there's nothing to investigate. He didn't have his seatbelt on. It's £100 fine. Give him that, and he has said he will pay it. But it's just like the last in a long line of stories that we've seen in the past few weeks about Rishi taking private planes everywhere because he's rich. Rishi drinking out of £300 coffee cups. It's like people have just got, they're trying to make him out that he's this rich guy who doesn't understand what other people other people's lives are like. People with less money than him, their lives are like. But he's the Prime Minister, for God's sake. You two know this, but he does more in a day than most of us do in a week.
I don't think people
The funny thing about it is that last night I was looking on social media, looking at loads and loads of footage of Keir Starmer in the back seat not wearing a seatbelt.
It was on Video 4.
Tony Blair in the back seat as Prime Minister not wearing a seatbelt.
So which police force should we contact for that then?
All of them.
Let's do it.
So, I mean,
But I did manage to find a bit of good news because everybody's like gloom and doom, talking the country down, things aren't good enough. But actually, the UK now is one of the best countries to invest in. So it's all like bullish CEOs globally. It was a PwC survey are now wanting to come here. Come to the UK, and it's gone up significantly since 2020, 2022, 23 looking here. So just behind USA and China, joint with Germany, this is the place to come. And I thought, you know what? We need to read more about this. We don't want the media talking us down because everybody knows confidence is key in this investment. Or it's just the opposition parties in cahoots with most of the mainstream media to talk it down for a change of government, where really we need to talk this up because they're losing us billions of pounds.
Yeah, completely.
If people are saying it's not a good place to be.
Did you guys read the story this week with Andrew Bailey, the boss of the Bank of England, who said the recession is not going to be as bad as we thought?
Yes.
I mean, and he said inflation is going to tumble faster than we thought. And I didn't believe it because he's the bloke who let inflation rocket in the first place and did nothing. So I didn't believe that. And I couldn't believe that the recession isn't going to be as bad. He said it would be the worst in 100 years. So I didn't want to believe it, but maybe it's true.
Yeah,
what you're saying.
But I'll tell you something else which you'll find hard to believe. It is true, but you'll find it hard to believe. And that's an exclusive set of figures that Philip has got to reveal now.
Well, I would be very interested in all of your opinions about it. Now, on GB News, not only do you hear voices and opinions you wouldn't hear on other news channels, but we also break stories that won't be covered elsewhere too. That's why we can exclusively reveal some information today. In my almost 18 years in Parliament, one thing I've learned is that all the things you think couldn't possibly happen are almost certainly happening. And I think this is a perfect example of that. So over the last few months, I've submitted freedom of information requests to every prison in the country and asked them how many of their prisoners have keys to their own cells. Yes, that's right. How many prisoners have keys to their own cells? 45 out of the 123 prisons replied to my FOI request. That's probably a story in itself, why the others didn't. But that covered 28,238 prisoners. And I can tell you that of those, 13,109 prisoners have their own key to their cell. So based on those replies, we can exclusively reveal on GB News today that over 46% of UK prisoners have their own key to their cell, covering Category B, Category C, Category D prisons, as well as female prisons. And 15 of the prisons which replied said they give every prisoner at their jail a key to their cell. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking it incredible that any prisoner has their own key to the cell. Seems to defeat the object of what prison's about, people might think, let alone almost half of all prisoners. And I just think that this will reinforce the view that many people hold, rightly I probably think, that the regime in our prisons is far too slack and lenient, with too much focus on the human rights of prisoners rather than on punishing prisoners for the crimes that they've committed. And in my view, people might have a different one, but in my view, handing keys to prisoners for their rooms makes it sound more like a hotel than a jail. And I just wonder whether jails will go the whole hog soon and introduce 24-hour room service for their prisoners as well. I just find this absolutely astounding that this can happen in our prisons. Carol, what do you...
I'm laughing because of the way you put that, but I mean, I'm furious. I'm raging. It's, the whole point of prison is that you're locked up. You've committed a crime. And you don't get sent to prison now for nicking a few sweets out of a shop. You go to prison for something really serious. And so most of them in there are violent. And to give them their own cell, the assumption is, I mean, I know, I listen to all the, the liberal lefties going, the assumption is you treat every prisoner with respect and they will respond with respect. Well, that's not happening. That just doesn't happen. And I've forgotten the name of the prison. There was a big new one built a few years ago, and all the people were, they had gyms and they had almost room service, all that nonsense. And the people in that prison got worse. They were assaulting all the staff, punching them, jumping on them, threatening them with knives. it doesn't work. You're in there because you're a bad un. You're not in there because it's a mistake. You're a bad un. And the idea that they can just wander around at will. People laugh at us when you just said what you said there. It's like a hotel. People laugh when you go, they're like holiday camps. The Liberals go, how dare you? It's all about, it's all about teaching them how to be great people. Well, the fact of it is we know that rehab doesn't actually work. The stats show that rehabilitation, doesn't work. They go out and half of them reoffend again. It's outrageous. People would be going mad about that.
And either way, you are, as you said, you are there. Part of it is a punishment for what you have done.
Good. It's good to go on for the pub quiz, isn't it, Kevin?
Well,
if anybody asks you how many...
It's a great one. If I go back...
Everyone will be putting zero down in the pub quiz.
I'm hoping that comes up on the chase when I go back on it. I mean, I had a moment where I was invited into a prison for lunch with the prison governor and somebody else. And it was delightful. And we went round the prison. I'm not going to name the prison because that would be wrong. But it was a lovely prison, a modern prison. The prisoners were sent each day the menu for the day. They were sent the menu for the day. Now, these weren't the really baddies, but they were still in prison, so they hadn't been particularly good, had they? Yeah. But they were still given a menu, and they could choose.
What is the deterrent to prison if you're being sent? Your own key, your own menu.
Well, there isn't really, is there? That's not a deterrent.
You see, the prison service say to me, because I've visited lots of prisons in the UK. I've visited them in America, Denmark. I like visiting prisons. It's very informative. And the thing that all the people in the prison service say to me is that the loss of liberty is their punishment.
Sure.
And that everything else, therefore, should be made as there's no reason it shouldn't be made as comfortable as possible. Well, it's the loss of...
But you could argue that if they're locked up for 23 hours a day.
They've got less of a loss of liberty if they've got the key to their own room and can walk around the estate.
I'm not agreeing with it. I'm saying that's what they say.
The loss of liberty is one thing, but for every criminal there's a victim.
Yeah.
And most of those victims, their lives are changed for the worse forever.
And they're ignored, Carol, by most. By most,
Well, we need to get our viewers' opinions on this. Please do get in touch. You know how to get in touch with us. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get in touch.
Now, coming up, former Cabinet Minister David Davis will join us as he has slammed the Tory MPs who have called for the return of Boris Johnson, so don't go anywhere.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back, almost 10:25. Now, former Cabinet Minister David Davis has slammed those within his party who are agitating for the return of Boris Johnson, claiming that such a move would condemn the party to a decade out of power.
We're delighted to say that we're joined by David Davis now. David, thank you ever so much for joining us. You wrote this article in the Independent, I think it was, earlier this week, saying that those Conservatives agitating for Boris Johnson to come back were in danger of destroying the Conservatives' chances of the next election and keeping the Conservative Party out of power for a decade. Why did you feel the need to say that?
Well, because so many of the younger MPs, younger Red Wall MPs with marginal seats, keep asking me, well, is this like 97? You know, are we running up to another 1997? So many asked me, I thought, well, I'm going to write in the paper the answer I give. And it's pretty simple. It's not like 97. I mean, the gap at the moment is broad but shallow, and it can be closed. But I also remind them that in 1997, the Tory party delivered the best economy in the Western world. I mean, the Blair chief economic advisors said they'd inherited the best economy any incoming Labour government ever had. And we got no credit for it. And we got no credit for it because we spent the previous several years undermining ourselves. And now what's happening with the sort of Boris acolytes is that, you hear them saying, oh, well, we're going to lose him terribly in the local government elections in May, and that'll be the time that Boris comes back. Well, if you keep saying that your own party is no good, or you keep trying to undermine your own prime minister, why should anybody vote for you? So that's the core of the issue. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the core of the argument. That's why I wrote the article.
But David, isn't it true, though, and his track record would tell you this, that he is an electoral asset? He is a one-man campaigning machine. So that's why they want him back.
Well, he was. I mean, the hard truth of the matter is he was very good at getting elected twice as the Mayor of London, and he did a good job there. And that was, of course, true in 2019. But bear in mind, he's been also quite lucky. I mean, in 2019, you both...
You always want a lucky general, though. You always want a lucky general.
Yes, of course. But those was I went around 17 seats in 2019 at 17 swing seats, and the Tory party, as usual, sent me to the Council of Estates, as you'd expect, and so I knocked on lots of doors, and the first name that came up wasn't Boris Johnson. The first name that came up was Jeremy Corbyn. They were terrified of the tax increases and the principles, frankly, of Jeremy Corbyn. Quite a lot of them were worried on patriotic grounds. The second impact on our result in 2019 was Nigel Farage. It was him pulling out the UKIP opposition to us in Tory seats, and it dropped away completely, the support for him when he did that. So those two things. Now, Boris had an impact. Of course he did. And any prime minister who wins an election has a right to claim some credit for it. But none of that's true now. I mean, we dropped to 20 points behind. 10 points of that came under Boris. The other 10 points came under Liz Truss. Carrying out, as it were, or supported by Boris's supporters. If we came back now, in my seat, half the Tories that I've met on the streets of my seat have said to me, we won't vote Tory for as long as you've got Boris as leader. That was way back, and it's still true.
David, I just wonder, do you think that there are some Tory MPs and maybe Tory members who are so sort of obsessed with the cult of Boris that they'd actually prefer to lose the next election so that they could say, see, we told you so. If you'd had our man, we would have won. Do you think they're so obsessed that they'd even be prepared to see that happen?
Well, I can't read their minds, but the sort of tenor of people talking about the May elections just coming up, we've got a lot of all-out local elections in May. It's almost as though they're wishing for us to lose, and there are thousands of Tory councillors out there who we should be supporting and bringing back. And when people start talking about May as, oh, this is a critical point, we're going to bring Boris back after May, then it sounds like they're wishing for it, and that's also very bad. It's bad for the morale of Tory activists. I mean, my activists hate it when that happens.
Your article, then, a little bit of a bite of Ronnie Reel for the 2019 intake and the Conservatives who are such Boris fans? Because are you saying, let's look to the future? There's lots of things that Boris has got to contend with, like the Privileges Committee.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, even let's imagine for a second that we reinserted Boris in there. He's got the Privileges Committee coming up. Even if he succeeds in persuading the Privileges Committee that he didn't deliberately mislead the House, I don't think anybody now argues that whether or not he misled the House. The question whether he did deliberately. Even if he succeeds in that, the public are going to see 2 or 3 months of people trotting out to that committee, giving evidence, saying we had this party and that party, when you couldn't go to a funeral, when you couldn't go to see your mum when she was dying, when you couldn't attend a wedding, all of those people will be looking at this in horror. So we've got 2 or 3 months of that coming. There then may be a finding against him. If there's a finding against him, that could be a disaster for him, because he may end up having to have a by-election in his own constituency. So, and he might not win it. So you've got all of that. And then after that, you've got the investigations on how well the COVID crisis was run. Now, look, to be fair to Boris, the mistakes that the British government made are the same mistakes that nearly every other government in the world made, other than Sweden. But nevertheless, that's going to be exposed too. That's not the backdrop for somebody who you want to bring in as a future prime minister. Your lucky general may have become a very, very unlucky general, just like Napoleon at Waterloo.
David Davis, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. And we're going to ask our panellists, our guests here today, an unlucky general now was a lucky one, now unlucky.
Do you think the right to be agitating to bringing back some Tory MPs and members?
I think they can talk about it, but he's never coming back. I think people have to accept that. He's never going to come back. We talked about the Privilege Committee there. Everyone on that Privilege Committee hates him. Even the Tory MPs are on that committee. They hate him. And even if, as David said, they find him, they say he misled Parliament, even if he did it accidentally, they've changed the rules so that he can be chucked. He's going to get a ruling against him for that. He's probably not going to save his seat, so he can't be our Prime Minister if he doesn't have a seat. But it's interesting, I don't agree with everything he said in terms of, Boris. He got in because of Corbyn, yes, but he also got in because of Brexit. He got in because Boris was promising Brexit, and the British public felt they'd been let down by the previous governments in not getting that. So that's one of the main reasons.
And that's why I talk about a lucky general, because all of these things came for him, didn't they? Yes, there was the Corbyn, yes, there was the Brexit. There were a whole host of things that people wanted him for.
But I think I look at Rishi Sunak and I don't see a leader, I see a manager, and I think the perfect combo for the Tories now is a manager and a leader figure. So and Sunak was that manager.
And
no, absolutely.
Kevin's nodding there furiously.
Completely. I mean, it's the CEO and the COO, isn't it? Really, it's somebody that is capable of winning the election, which Boris was, and who knows, could have been again. Yeah. But it then needs somebody behind him who is capable of actually running the organisation, which Boris obviously wasn't.
Yes.
But what a winner! I mean, just an absolute winner.
It's interesting. People often say Dominic Cummings was a sinister force. However, David in his article said that Boris could never make the hard decisions. Cummings did, and told Boris what to do, and it kind of worked for a long time.
Okay. Well, look, here's somebody else who's not coming back, but she's decided that herself, and that's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, was held up around the world as a model politician for progressive politics. It's this initial popularity that has caused such a surprise reaction to the news of her resignation this week after losing control of her Labour Party and facing plummeting favourability in opinion polls. Well, we're now joined by New Zealand-based journalist Nicola Shepherd. And what I want to ask, was it burnout, or is this a big cop-out?
Well, good morning, Esther and Phil. Thanks for having me on the show. It's been a big sea change down here, just because Jacinda Ardern has been such a ubiquitous presence for the last 5.5 years, and also because we have 3-year terms, but unlike our Australian Antipodean Italian cousins, who seem to have prime ministers coming and going every 5 minutes, it's very unusual for us when we have prime ministers coming and going. So it's a big thing. there's a multiplicity of factors to do with her stepping down. One is that legitimately, I think she is burned out. Another one is that whilst in the UK, there's, at least another year, I think, until the election, and there's no election in America until 2024. But in New Zealand, there's an election coming this year. And so she would have been facing economic headwinds as well as the fatigue that comes with an incumbent. And so that was another big factor, I think. And one more factor would be that a potential coalition partner and a maverick called Winston Peters, who's been a kind of figure for about a quarter of a century now, had ruled out any future coalition with her, limiting her options even more. And also there's a resurgent opposition leader that seems to have become focused as a leadership bloc on the right. And so all these factors combined, and I think also wanting to leave on her own terms, combined, I think, to sort of force her hand.
Nicholas, during her sort of what I consider to be an authoritarian regime that she imposed in New Zealand during the pandemic, she still appeared to be hugely popular at the time and won an election during that pandemic very easily. And so where's it all gone wrong for her politically? Why has she gone down the tubes in the opinion poll so fast?
Well, people liked her during the pandemic. The nation was very unified. We have a kind of just sort of get on with it kind of mentality. But in the wake of that, there seemed to be like a huge disconnect that emerged between the rhetoric of visions and emotional intelligence and the actual practicalities of delivering on legislation. And so people's pocketbooks and kitchen table economics, emotional intelligence doesn't really pay the bills. And so I think that's largely where it started to go wrong. She's still quite a popular figure, which is partly due to the fact that people still have a kind of lingering fondness, but also partly to do with the fact that in New Zealand, being an opposition leader is an incredibly difficult thing. And we tend to have a sort of set and forget mentality when it comes to prime ministers.
But
the flip side to that is that once the rot sets in, then there's nothing you can do as a prime minister once people have sort of made that collective shift, which seemed to have been going on in the last 6 months to a year.
But she seems to be running away before she gets the vote of the people. Now looking at the recession, looking at inflation, looking at the cost of living. What do her supporters think? Do they not see this as just somebody who's copping out?
I think her supporters, there's still that subsisting fondness. So for her base will always be very fond of her, I think. And I think her legacy will improve slightly over time, even though, you've got economic confidence is at an all-time low right now and food costs are through the roof. So, her base is still very fond. And there'll still be a role for her to play, I think, in a sort of a way very similar to the last Labour Prime Minister, Helen Clark, who went on to become the UN Development Fund head. I think she'll get some internationalist kind of role like that. But in the meantime, I think people are just starting to shift in their perspectives towards wanting practicality rather than, vision.
Nicholas Shepherd, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You can go to bed now. I know you've been staying up to do the interview. You're the opposite end of the day. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, Carol, I can't stand Jacinda Ardern.
I'm with you.
Well,
three here.
I can't imagine why she was so popular during that terrible authoritarian regime.
You actually said it there. You said you think she's an authoritarian. I was listening to some TV stations this week and reading some papers, and you'd think they were talking about someone who's a cross between Mother Teresa and Indira Gandhi. It's like this woman...
Saint Jacinda.
This woman is an authoritarian. Let's not forget that during lockdown, she literally annexed a country for 2.5 years. She had a zero COVID policy, which we all know was stupid, long after the vaccine had been rolled out.
But I was also going to say, we were talking about Boris before as a lucky leader. So was she. Her rise to the top, very lucky, straight in deputy leader, straight in unopposed as leader. And when the election fell, she was very lucky because it was the start of lockdown and nobody had seen the consequences,
Correct.
Kevin.
And interestingly, she's standing down, because fatigue, She's a young woman. Come on,
I mean, I was gonna
fatigue
say,
for goodness'
5.5
sake.
years
She's
in
lifted from
politics.
one meeting to the next.
She's had a baby in office, though, hasn't
Okay,
she? She's a mum with a
okay,
young
no,
child.
I'll give her that. Absolutely,
She has aged
absolutely.
a lot, which I think as well. Which lots
You
of
can't
politics.
say that now. You can't say that.
No, you're not allowed to say
she
that. No, but
You're
you
not
know,
allowed to
interesting,
talk
Carol.
about
I'll tell you what. She in late 2022.
You tell
Hold
him,
on,
Carol.
let me make a note. I'll make a note of that. So I don't make that mistake.
So no more cake in the office.
No, and no more meat.
No, we want
no
that.
more meat, right?
We want cake.
And stop the steroids because you're looking too good. In late 2022, there was a flurry of sort of suggestions in New Zealand, you know, that she was going to cop out, and she said, "No way whatsoever." She said, "No, I'm staying." All of a sudden, popularity's gone, and I'm fatigued, and I've got to get out. of this. Come on, for goodness sake, she's going to make millions, right? In
She will.
Carol, we've got to move. I'm afraid we've got to move on.
Pity.
But you will be
I've
back.
only getting started on that.
I know, you'll be back with us. You'll be back
All
with us
I
at
can
11
say,
o'clock.
but Phil, it has to be said, you stand up in a meeting to say, I won't be here by the 7th of February. The election's in autumn.
Yeah.
I won't be here. I mean, come on.
exactly.
Come on, get in touch. What do you think?
Yeah. Anyway, coming up, has Love Island knocked a lot of men's confidence in their looks?
Has it, Phil?
Well,
Not you,
not me.
obviously,
I'm still resilient. We'll be speaking to a leading Harley Street doctor about that.
We'll also be having some of our viewers join us live on the show to share their biggest issues that's affecting them this week, so don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. We've had lots of you getting in touch this morning with your views, Esther.
I've got this one, Donna. The PM gets investigated and a fixed penalty fine for showing a video where he isn't wearing a seatbelt. On the same basis, will Prince Harry get investigated and charged for taking illegal drugs, which he's admitted to on TV and his book, Telling the World? Surely illegal drugs are much more of an offence, a serious offence, than not wearing a seatbelt. Thanks, Donna.
Lots of comments about my freedom of information request about prisons having keys to their own cells. Barry says if prisons are getting more like hotels, soon they'll kick the inmates out so they can house migrants. And Peter says, I know of a former prison officer who resigned after being told he had to treat prisoners as customers. Lots and lots of comments coming through.
And Amanda, hi all, love the show, perfect balance of presenters and guests. We have a word for a room with a key and a menu. That's a hotel, not a prison.
Absolutely, keep those views coming through. Now, from friend of Corbyn to Davos junkie, Keir Starmer continues his journey from left to Blairite. Let's now welcome GB News' political reporter Olivia Utley to explain what's behind it.
Yes, so Keir Starmer this week has said that he's happy to be compared to Blair in 1997. And we can certainly see over the last couple of weeks we've had a slew of shadow cabinet ministers come forward with huge reforming plans for various areas. We had Jonathan Ashworth a couple of weeks ago on welfare. He's going to rip up the way job centres work. Wes Streeting, of course, on his big plan for reforming the NHS, removing the idea of GPs as gatekeepers. Bridget Phillipson with a huge plan for childcare, which would essentially involve giving free childcare to all parents of children aged between 0 and 11. This is the sort of package of reform that we saw from Blair in the run-up to 97. And Keir Starmer's perfectly happy to admit that. The difficulty is, of course, that when you scratch beneath the surface, there's quite a lot of vagueness there. And on some issues, there's huge ambiguity, really. They claim that all of these reforms are fully funded. That's what James Murray said to the breakfast show this morning on GB News. But on childcare, for instance, they've actually admitted that it isn't fully funded. On the NHS, the answer seems to be to use scrap non-dom status, raise £3.6 billion, and that's going to clear up all of the NHS's problems. Very doubtful that scrapping non-dom status would raise that much, but even that would...
$3 billion, it's all right, we're spending $1 trillion or so, but I want to know, will the real Keir Starmer stand up? We had him to get elected being Corbyn, and his 10 pledges, most of them have gone now, how he would have a renationalisation, getting rid of universal credit. So what he's talking about now in Davos, is this the real Keir or not? Or will he just say anything to anyone to get the top job?
Well, yes, it's very hard to say, isn't it? Because you know, just a few years ago, Keir Starmer was enthusiastically campaigning for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. We've sort of forgotten quite what an extreme point of view that is. And it really is hugely left-wing. And now we see him in Davos saying that, you know, he is the friend of big business. Charles Moore in The Telegraph today suggesting that maybe the natural next step for Starmer is to promise not to raise the top level of income tax. We're seeing this very new, packaged-up, business-friendly Keir Starmer. But is this the real leader of the Labour Party? And is it actually possible? Is it fully funded? I'm not quite sure who Keir Starmer is at the moment.
I mean, when he was challenged about how he ditched his vows for the leadership and changed them to become more Blairite, his reply was, which was interesting, when I was running for leader, I made pledges that reflected my values. As if your values change every sort of year or so, which I thought was quite interesting.
I've got a set of principles, here's a new set.
What the point I want to make, Olivia, there's a feeling amongst many Conservative MPs that Keir Starmer's a lawyer rather than a politician, and he'll deliver whatever brief he's given to deliver. Is that fair? Is that a view that Labour MPs would share, do you think?
I think there are some Labour MPs who would certainly share that view, and this idea that he'll just sort of present whatever works to keep the people happy at the time. If you look a little bit deeper, I think that perhaps the Keir Starmer that we're seeing now, the sort of Blairite Keir Starmer, is the real Keir Starmer. But for so long, he's had to keep the left of his party happy. And he is keen to portray this idea that he has got Corbynism, completely rid the Labour Party of Corbynism. That simply isn't true. And he does still need to keep the left of his party happy.
I want to know, is he going to be a weak leader? Because it seems to me when things get too tough, he stays out the way. So whether that was unions and strikes, you know, Mr. Invisible, whether it is this now standing up for women and women's issues, staying out the way. So is he going to be a weak leader?
Well, I think you can add to that list the small boat problem as well. He says that he's going to speak to the French and tackle the problem upstream. That doesn't mean anything. On strikes, what he says that he'll sit around the negotiating table, well, that's what the government's been doing and it hasn't got us anywhere. Doesn't really mean anything. On the women issue, he said that he agreed with Sturgeon's plan for gender recognition reform and has now gone back on it and said that he doesn't think that people should be allowed to change their gender before 16. So, as you say, it's not on the huge issues facing the country today. It isn't completely clear where he stands, which I think does suggest an element of weakness. Although that said, this week we've seen the Labour Party coming up with big reforming plans and the government does seem to be on the back foot.
Olivia, thank you very much indeed. Now, the incredibly popular TV show Love Island is back on our screens, and as viewers lust over men with six-packs and women with the perfect bikini bod, one Harley Street surgeon is looking elsewhere.
Dr. Furkan Raja has said that every year when the show is broadcast, he receives a huge surge in inquiries from men looking to do something about their hair loss. saying the show often leads them to reflect on their own body image. So can the show be harmful to men, and should you avoid it if you have certain physical insecurities? Would you like to say that Dr. Raja joins us now? Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Raja, for joining us. I thought this was interesting and incredible, really. I mean, are you really saying that Love Island itself has led more men becoming insecure about their looks and wanting to do something about it? Is that really true?
Firstly, thanks for having me. It's certainly something that we've seen over the past few years. We know classically, particularly social media, but TV shows where that people are showcased in a certain way, a certain type of body image is portrayed. People will often start to feel more self-conscious about their own body image, and this is well reported in the media, particularly for the female population. But as a hair transplant surgeon, the vast majority of my patients being men with male pattern baldness, we're starting to see more and more men who are affected by this, either indirectly via watching the show with their partner, or partner making remarks about certain people on the show, or just watching these TV shows, and of course seeing it on social media as well.
What I don't understand is, I mean, I don't need to watch Love Island. I don't watch Love Island, to be perfectly honest. I certainly don't need to know that there are better-looking men out there than me. So, do you not think that I mean, I don't understand why they need to watch Love Island to realise that. I mean, do you think that these people are watching Love Island and thinking, look, if I look like these people, I might be able to date some hot Love Island girls? Is that what the motivation is?
I think it certainly works both ways for men and women. Yeah, I guess that is one of the things that where they're seeing these people on the show. They might have friends or colleagues who make remarks about how good looking they are, and then that drops a seed a lot of the time, and they're thinking, well, I wish I looked like that, and they often come in with pictures of certain people and say, well, can you make me look like this? And it's a very difficult job for us then to manage the expectations. But yeah, this is definitely something that we see very commonly.
Before you sort of came on and I knew I was speaking to you, I was casting my mind back to when I was growing up. And, my parents and think, don't look in the mirror and you shouldn't be vain and it's not all about looks, it's about sort of the content, not the package. But now with Instagram and with all of these photos, 24/7, we're getting images. Have we gone so much vainer as, a race of people?
I think times have certainly changed, particularly over the past 10 to 15 years, and we're starting to see the next generation have a completely different set of values when it comes to body image. And it's always been a topic of debate, particularly in the medical community and the surgical community, about what is ethical and, how do we treat people in a way that's ethical and fair. But we often have to manage very difficult expectations. I think a lot of the time we're treating people's self-confidence or negative body image rather than actually physically treating their appearance. So it's part of this is there's definitely a mental health aspect to it, and it gives me great reassurance when I see people coming back after a year for a full review, and they're much more confident in themselves, and they feel like their life is more wholesome. It's definitely a very rewarding experience.
Dr. Raja, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time. Was it my
Most
looks?
welcome.
Was it looks with me, or was it the other?
Of course it was. To be fair, it was your desire to constantly do these FOI requests. I love you're being like an anorak. You know what it was. I'm that as well, of course. Now, we read out your views, and we will continue to do so. We've got loads of them having come in this morning, but some brave souls have decided to come on the show too, who've sent their views in the past. So this week we're going to discuss the matters that are most important to them. And if you'd like to come on our Saturday morning show with Esther and Phil, then will you email us now, gbviews@gbnews, and say you want to come on our show so we can have you on next week or the week after. So let's now meet Tony Dawson and Amanda Radford. So, Tony, thank you very much. You are our viewers. You exist in person as well as on paper, and Amanda there too. Tony, do you want to tell us what are your key issues this week? What's got you all of a doodah?
Oh, where do we start? I think the cost of living is the big one, because I think that is the core of all the problems that we have in the country at the moment. This is the reason why, workers are striking, because they don't feel they're being paid enough. Inflation, that needs to be brought down. Energy, bills, costings, and so on. I mean, it's everything's broken at the moment, and everything just seems a bit of a mess. And I think we need a strong government now to come in and just to tidy things up a little bit, I think, there. And, yeah, absolutely.
And Tony, you're a teacher. So what do you think about the strikes? You've got first-hand knowledge there.
Yeah, I'm kind of split on this. I think with regards to strikes generally, whether it's teachers, train drivers, nurses and so on, you have a government that is quite stubborn and doesn't really want... They're drawing up clear battle lines, I think, with the government. They don't want to negotiate. And I think you have union leaders who, as well, they've got their own political agendas, and they want to kind of like just, get the Tories, as they say. So you've got they just don't want to budge either side. They've clearly drawn their battle lines up, and they don't want to negotiate. I mean, what happened to ACAS? I mean, we used to have this organisation that used to get everybody around the table and, negotiate a deal over many days, and then they'd come to an agreement. But we don't seem to do that anymore. So
we've heard what Tony's concerned about there. What things are particularly concerning you?
Hi, Emma. I think I echo everything that Tony said in terms of the country being in a mess. And for me, I think my main issue is that I felt politically homeless for some years. I was a lifelong Conservative voter. I was born and raised in Islington, and I worked in Islington, so that was an unpopular political opinion to hold. But I was true and dyed-in-the-wool Tory. But since the Brexit vote and the mess that has been made of it since, I just find that I have no political home now. I don't feel that the Tories, the Conservatives, represent me as a Brexit voter, but also as a person that is positive about the benefits that could come from growing this country in terms of its young people, its economy. Everything boils down to the politics and the way political system has worked over the last, not just the last few years, the last few decades.
So, Amanda, if there was an election tomorrow, how would you vote? How do you think you'd vote if there was an election tomorrow?
I have to say I probably would vote for reform. I think many people feel the same way as me, that the Conservatives no longer represent them. And I'm sorry to you, Esther and Phil, because you two are great MPs. But I do feel that a lot of people are afraid that if they vote for reform, that it's just a wasted vote and that would let in a Labour government. So I just think everyone needs to have the courage of their convictions to send a message to this current government that they're not representing the British people.
You know what I like most about our viewers there? It is this fact that you can say and speak as freely as you are. What
straight talking.
Yeah, what your concerns are, what you're going to do. And that's why we're so pleased that not only were we reading out your views, we actually have got you in person. So thank you both so much for coming on today. And that's what I like, straight talking people.
Absolutely. That's it for the first hour. Coming up, Boris's memoir is set to be an explosive read. We'll be joined by Professor Jonathan Shallett in the studio to look ahead to it. That and much more, so don't go anywhere.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil here on GB News. Coming up this hour,
Professor Jonathan Shallett will join us in the studio to look ahead to the release of Boris Johnson's memoir, which is set to be like no other.
and love is in the eye of the beholder, never a truer word said. So how rude is it when people think that one half of the relationship is better than the other? Well, we'll be meeting a couple later who have been trolled online with people calling him hunky and her mediocre.
You suffer that all the time, don't you? And with the latest round of strikes, we'll get our guest today to look at when the chaos may end.
And of course, we want to hear from you this morning, so if you want to get involved in today's show, email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we have all that, here's the latest headlines with Aaron.
Good morning, it's a minute past 11. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The co-founder of the bus firm Stagecoach, Dame Anne Gloag, has been charged in connection with a human trafficking investigation. Police Scotland say 4 individuals, understood to be members of her family, were charged on Thursday in connection with alleged human trafficking and immigration offences. A statement issued on her behalf says Ms Gloag denies the malicious allegations made against her and her family. A senior Labour MP has described the Prime Minister as ridiculous after he was given a fixed penalty notice by police for not wearing his seatbelt. Rishi Sunak has apologised for the incident, which happened while filming a social media clip earlier this week. His spokesman says the Prime Minister made an error of judgment and will comply with the fine of up to £500. However, the Shadow Financial Secretary, James Murray, says Mr Sunak has lost control.
Just when you thought the Conservatives couldn't get any more ridiculous, Rishi Sunak shows that he can't even fasten his own seatbelt, and I think this speaks volumes about the fact that the Prime Minister is not in control. And compare Keir Starmer with Rishi Sunak. You know, Keir Starmer has been at the World Economic Forum this week, promoting the UK, promoting our plan for economic growth, and Rishi Sunak can't fasten his own seatbelt. I think people will make their own judgment about who's best to lead the country.
However, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says Rishi Sunak is a human being who made a mistake.
The Prime Minister put his hand straight up. It was a mistake. He's apologised for it. He takes responsibility for it. He hasn't actually gone down that path of blaming anyone else. He's taken responsibility for it and he'll pay the fine. He's a human as well as a incredibly busy politician, the Prime Minister. He's got a frantic, hectic schedule, but he's made it clear there's no excuses.
Well, Mr Raab, meanwhile, has been defending another colleague, Nadeem Zahawi, after fresh questions have been raised about his tax affairs. Dominic Raab told GB News he's confident Mr Zahawi has been transparent after he was accused of paying a penalty as part of a multi-million-pound settlement with HMRC. Labour have called on Mr Zahawi to explain himself after it was reported he paid a 7-figure sum to end the dispute. Mr Zahawi's team has been contacted for comment, and he has previously said his taxes were properly declared and paid in the UK. However, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says Mr Sunak should sack him.
Dominic Raab, who's being investigated for bullying, is passing judgment on Nadeem Zahawi, who's just had a £1 million fine for not paying his taxes on time. That pretty much epitomises this Conservative cabinet. When the Prime Minister came into office, he said that he would run a government that would have honesty, integrity and professionalism at its heart. None of those three things are happening today.
Former Health Secretary Sajid Javid says charging patients for their GP and A&E appointments is crucial to the survival of the NHS. Speaking to The Times, Mr Javid said it would help the NHS ration its finite supply more effectively. Mr Javid also said the appreciation for the health service has become a religious fervour and a barrier to reform. Western allies have failed to reach an agreement to provide German-made tanks to Ukraine, which are being urgently requested by Kyiv to counter Russia's planned spring offensive. The US and its allies met yesterday and did agree to send more NATO weaponry to Ukraine, but Germany remains reluctant to provide its Leopard tanks or to allow other countries to donate theirs, despite increasing pressure to do so. However, Ukraine's defence minister says his forces will train on Leopard tanks in Poland in what he claims is a breakthrough. The new figures show average waits for NHS dental treatment in Scotland have increased in 12 health boards since 2019. Scottish Liberal Democrats found one patient had to wait over 3 years for outpatient treatment. The Scottish Government said they're working on addressing the backlog created by the pandemic. And a helicopter search is underway in the United States for the British actor Julian Sands, who went missing 8 days ago. Rescuers say conditions are treacherous in the San Gabriel Mountains in California, where 2 hikers have died in the last month. Sands is best known for his roles in A Room with a View and Arachnophobia. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, but now it is back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Evan. We've had lots and lots of views this morning, Esther.
I've got Gary here, a retired prison officer of 32 years and someone who's devastated by the way the prison has changed dramatically, for the worst, I must say. That's what he's saying, not me. However, when you're describing the key issues, the key is for the prisoner as a courtesy key to lock the door to stop other prisoners stealing from their cells. The staff key overrides any key a prisoner is issued with. He said, saying that, I'm very strongly aligned with what the panel has been saying today. Successive governments and people without a clue about prison life have made it a soft, pathetic approach and not a deterrent anymore.
Yeah, well, I suppose you can't be too careful when you've got prisoners in prison, can you? You can't be too careful with your goods. Della says, it's a joke. Might just as well build a 20-foot high wall around a holiday camp and let the prisoners run it. Forget punishment.
And Sean, apart from the loss of liberty, prisons are meant to act as a deterrent. How can they be a sufficient deterrent if it's more comfortable and they eat better in prison than if they were outside?
Margie says, can't believe this discussion. I'm sat here in total disbelief. No wonder the prisons are full. What has happened to our country? I'm very angry hearing this. Keep those views coming in.
And we're again joined in the studio by Daily Express columnist Carol Minogue and celebrity chef Kevin Woodford. So, Kevin, if we turn to you first.
OK. There used to be a time, you know, when if you didn't feel great, you picked up the phone, you made an appointment with the GP, and that was it. You know, you might have to wait a day, you might have to wait a couple of days, but you'd get in to see him. When I ring my surgery now, I don't get a receptionist. I get a medical appointments navigator. That's what I get. I get a medical appointments navigator who then wants to quiz me with regards to what my problem is, right? Now, that can be quite embarrassing for somebody who's not a medical person on the other end of the phone. But it's getting worse, and I really am concerned about the NHS now, really seriously concerned. And there was a story in yesterday, in the Express, in fact, today, with regard to a young law student in Leeds, right, who he started to get headaches and, you know, pain in the neck, all the rest of the symptoms that, you know, requires some attention. So he phoned his GP. He couldn't see a GP, so he had this remote GP consultation. He had 4 of them, right? And it wasn't a problem for the surgery. You're perfectly okay. But he died. He died because he had mastoiditis of the ear, which turned into a massive problem in the brain, and the guy died. Had the GPs seen him, tested him properly, sent him for some serious tests, this guy would still be alive, allegedly, right? So I just think we're at a stage now where I wonder where this is going to end. I seriously do. And I just put a caveat on that. We lived in Spain for a while, right? And in Spain, the health service is very, very good. But on top of that, and I know there's an argument for and against what I'm going to say, but we would pay around about €200 a year for a service called Helicopterio Sanitario, where you rang up this particular number, and if you're on the golf course and you had a heart attack, a helicopter would land, pick you up and take you to hospital. If you were at home and you didn't feel very well, which happened to me one particular year, and the ambulance comes out to you at 11 o'clock at night with a doctor, a nurse and a driver, and they come in with everything you need, right? And so there is this, I think that we are getting to a stage in this country where the NHS is so poor, every aspect of it, right? You know, from the GPs to the hospitals to the ambulance service, the whole thing, that I do believe that there's a call for a similar type of service for those that can afford it and are prepared to pay for it.
The bit I don't understand is that when you ring up the doctors at 8 o'clock in the morning and they say, I'm sorry, we haven't got an appointment today, ring back tomorrow morning. And I thought, well, why don't they just say, well, you know, which always used to happen, the first appointment we've got is on Wednesday at... And you can say, oh, yeah, I'll have that. I mean, can you imagine any other organisation work? Like if you rang up the hairdressers and rang up in the morning and said, I want a haircut, they said, I'm sorry, I've got an appointment today.
But Philip, I would like to know where that surgery is, where if I rang up today and they said, we haven't got one today, you can have one tomorrow, I can't get that.
This is the lunacy of some targets, you see. They can pretend they've taken emergency ones on that day.
And they've ticked that
even
box.
if they've ignored other
Just
ones.
tell people when they're available so you can fit yourself in.
It seems astonishing to me because when I was a kid, I remember if you were sick and you called the GP, they would come out all hours and they had a team with them. So if you were ill at 11 o'clock, and you know, the thing is, when you get sick at night time, it is the most terrifying time. So the idea that someone would come out was a massive comfort. Now, it's out, you know, and you know, there was the vote recently where GPs voted to work 9 to 5. I mean, do not go into the business of saving lives if you're only prepared to work 9 to 5. It seems...
The only hours that we get ill.
I think lots of GPs don't work full time.
But equally, that's why everybody's going to A&E, isn't it? That's why you all jump in the car, get to the A&E, overwhelm A&E because there's nobody else.
That's totally right. There was some stats recently that said 60% of GPs only work a 3-day week. Well, that's why we have this backlog of people not being able to get appointments, because 60% of them are at home the other 2 days in a week, still getting paid full pay.
And you've got to remember that the majority of surgeries now, GPs, I mean, it's a business. It's what it is.
It is a business. Exactly.
You know, it's not NHS. It's a business. That's what it is.
It's private business.
Carol?
Yeah. The story I'm choosing is my own column.
Quite right, too.
Well, it's a good job I've got it in front of me here.
And very good that it is, too.
Well, I just...
No, hang on, I'll tell you what it is. It's fun, feisty and fearless.
I know, we've got to get that.
It's a good strapline now.
That's like... Anyway, so I've been butting heads. I've been butting heads. With a lot...
another side of you here now,
You'll
Carol.
be in prison for these, get your own key if you're not careful.
Butting heads with a lot of union leaders over the past few weeks. All the guys who are, you know, taking their people out on strike. And what really gets me is when you start to challenge a paramedic or someone who drives an ambulance or a nurse or a doctor about why they're going to go on strike, when I say to them, how can you turn your backs on sick, frail, vulnerable people? The stock in trade thing they all come out with to stop the argument is, you know, some of our members have to use food banks. Now, you know, OK. You know, when I hear that, it's very difficult to say, you're talking, Tosh. But you know, and I'm sure a very few are. But, you know, I don't understand why a paramedic who's on 47 grand a year, because they get a basic wage and then with overtime and social hours, it's 47 grand a year. Why does he have to use a food bank? Why does a nurse who's on an average of 35 grand a year have to use a food bank? Why does a fireman who with overtime is on an average of 42 grand a year, and most firemen have second jobs because of their flexi hours? Why does he have to use a food bank? The bottom line is, if you're on 40 grand a year, you need to manage your money better. food banks are for people who really are on their uppers. They're for people who've lost everything, their homes, their jobs, their pride. That's what food banks are for. They're not for, there's a difference between, your wage not buying you everything you want and your wage not buying you what you need to live. And that, for me, is the problem.
And obviously the MP, Lee Anderson, was scolded this week for saying a similar thing. And what he's saying is, don't we need support in budgeting? Or how is it? Is it sort of more acceptable that people can go to a food bank now? Is it sort of worked into what they do? Or is it just a stock-in-phrase answer to make us all feel bad?
I think they stop. I think they use it to stop the discussion.
Just to put the other side of the argument, I guess some people might say, well, look, people, whatever their income is, they have bills up to a certain level and whatever. And so with mortgage rates having gone up,
I get it.
With inflation going up, they might be on, a reasonable salary.
But you're saying they've got a shortfall.
They've got a higher cost base, and so they've still got a shortfall. That means that they can't pay the bills.
The thing is, everyone's salaries now seem smaller because of inflation. So whatever you earn, it just seems a lot less than it did a year ago. But it just seems to me that union leaders are using this as a weapon so that they don't have to justify.
You can't come back to that, can you? If somebody says, this is where I am, I've got so little money, I'm at a food bank and the church is helping me, it does sort of stop conversation.
Do you remember?
But as Carol says, for it to be used within the sort of the whole trade union argument is not right. In fact, Lee Anderson, interestingly, you mentioned Lee Anderson, who I really like Lee Anderson. He says it as it is. Both hips come out, both barrels. He suggested that the guy or the member of staff that works for him gets paid £30,000 a year and doesn't require a food bank. The argument is also, and Carol's right, there is a question of managing your resources. But equally, I suppose, from Philip's perspective as well, you've got to think, well, different parts of the country, there are different...
Kevin, when you talked about someone on 30 grand a year, I get why people on 30 grand a year are having problems. But I think if you're on 47 grand a year, I think you just need to manage your money better. But, do you remember those... and this does not apply to people who really need a food bank now, but do you remember the nurse, she was called Claire Austin? It was a few years ago, and she was in a debate in Scotland, and she was a nurse and said, I can't manage on my money. And she was crying. Anyway, they went to a social media account. She was in a 5-star hotel in New York. She was drinking champagne. She was at parties. She was living a life of Riley. So that's what I mean. That you can't just use that phrase and expect it to be a weapon. And my question still to all those union leaders of the nurses and the paramedics is, how can you walk out on sick and dying people? I don't get it.
Well, in a different way, I was looking at some of the statistics this week, and so concerned are people that they can't get into hospital, or if the delays are so long for their operation, they're actually moving with their feet. And 480,000 people since 2022 now have taken out private health insurance, and others are taking out loans so they can afford a one-off, if they need it, operation. And I think this is the way forward. This could be what the NHS has got to balance and beware of.
You're totally right. It's like I had an X-ray recently, and I wanted to kind of get it done because it was something I was very worried about. And I think I paid 250 quid for it, and I thought it's worth paying 250 quid to find out if you've got something terrible or not.
Interestingly, on that, very quickly, I had a procedure a couple of weeks ago. I went back to see the consultant the other day, seriously, right? And I paid privately because it would have been 5 years before I... It wasn't serious, but it was annoying me and it needed to be dealt with. And the consultant said to me, everything was fine. He said, fantastic. He said, I have to tell you, had we not done this privately, you'd probably be 5 years before we even looked at it. Do you know what I mean?
It's outrageous.
Crazy.
The thing that's really got me going, and it's got me going for some time, I've probably even mentioned it on this show before, actually, is the front page of the Daily Express today. They've got a campaign going, Shock Death of High Street Banks by 2027.
And it was the date, wasn't it, that shocked you even more, how quickly it's going to
Lloyds
happen.
and Halifax have said that they're going to shut more banks, and at this rate, they'll all be closed by 2027 at the current rate. And the Dexter's got a great battle to save our high street banks. This really annoys me because, look, if companies are struggling financially, I'm all for them cutting their costs in order to survive. Banks are not struggling financially. They're making massive profits, and yet they are abandoning our high streets. They're abandoning the customers who don't want to go online. They just see people and their customers as somebody to screw more and more money out of, and I think it's really
because you can't do without one, can you? You can't do without one.
They're closing bank accounts down of people that they find unprofitable in order to make even more extreme profits. And I think it's got to the point where I think the government should say to the banks, look, we're struggling for money. I'm not in favour of this generally, but with the banks, I really don't like the banks. And I would say to the banks, look, you're now making excess profits on the back of screwing people as much as possible. We are, unless you stop closing your branches, and unless you stop closing bank accounts that you think are uneconomic, we're going to impose a windfall tax on you. And the only way you're going to avoid it is by a commitment to keep the branches open and keep people's bank accounts
And Phil,
open.
the reason I think you could make an exception that way, because you wouldn't be an interventionist otherwise, is because so much now by government is dictated that it has to be online. That you're getting, whether it is, you know, real-time information from businesses, people getting paid maybe benefits on, you know, they're pushing everybody that way.
But
therefore, they've got a
But there are some people, Esther, who can't do online. You know, if you're over a certain age, you know, how are you ever going to access your money? How are you ever going to access medical attention if everything is online? And I just, you know, I'm hopeless at doing stuff online. And I've had to learn how to do my accounts and stuff online and how to access my bank. My husband's had me, like, me head down for months. Because
Carol, I'll add another thing. If you've got a bad broadband connection, it's not
Yes,
great.
you can't get
You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there you go. So if anyone from the banks are watching, keep these branches open for people. Don't just look at increasing your profits and increasing your bonus. Start looking after your customers.
Because he loves his FOIs and Lord knows what happens. He could be going, look at that. Oh, look, Kevin, it's been fantastic as always. Carol, fantastic.
Good to
Hope
see
to have
you
you
both.
back on soon. Now, coming up, Professor Jonathan Shallett will join us in the studio to look ahead to the release of Boris Johnson's memoirs, which is set to be like no other. Don't go anywhere.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 11:23. Lots of views still coming in. Esther, what have you got there?
I've got Stephen here, like your guest on Speaker's Corner. Remember, you can come on Speaker's Corner next week if you want to. I was a lifelong Conservative supporter. I'm now going to reform. That's Stephen there. All very sad.
Sylvia says the Labour Party can say all they like. They haven't had to cope with what has been happening in the last 3 years. It's what they will do and promises they keep if and when they form a new government that counts. The unions will still have their say and control over them. By the way, I love listening to the two of you. You make a lovely couple. Thank you very much, Sylvia. We need MPs like yourselves to speak up for the majority of the country. I despair what is happening to this once great country.
And Danny says, really, question mark, question mark, question mark. Why can't men stop being so delicate and weak? Those men on Love Island are no threat to me in any way. I'm certainly not going to be going and having all of those men procedures. He's confident in himself. Thanks, Danny.
And Mark says, when I voted Conservative at the last general election, I was voting for Boris, regardless of if he's any good. I'm disgusted that my vote was destroyed, especially by traitors like David Davis. He just cannot see what he has done. Quite a lot of support here for Boris in the comments, I've got to say.
Works well into the next interview then, doesn't it?
It does indeed. So the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is set to publish his memoirs, which his publishers have described as an account like no other.
While we don't know yet what the book will be titled or when it'll be released, speculation is rife about the shockwaves it could send through Westminster. Well, we're joined now by Professor Jonathan Shallett to talk about it. So I was going to say Prince Harry has set the bar really high with Spur being the fastest non-fiction book to sell. What do you now have to give away in a autobiography to get people wanting to read it on the shelves? What will Boris have to put in his book?
I think the Boris I mean, you mentioned non-fiction for Prince Harry. I mean, some would question that. I mean, some would say there's a lot of fiction in there because he's very clever when he uses the word "my truth" because that almost admits it's not necessarily true because you're saying it's my truth, not some...
Recollections may vary.
Recollections may vary, as our wonderful late Queen, I think, said. I think Boris's book can be the truth, first of all, because his life is simply amazing. Whatever you think or don't think of Boris Johnson, his life is extraordinary. Both his personal life, his business life, his writing life. He's had bestsellers, remember, himself as an author. He's not new to writing. His Churchill book sold over 150,000 copies and was a bestseller. He sold over 600,000 books already. So he comes to the book as an established writer. His journey in Parliament, his journey as the Mayor of London, his journey in his private life. And the thing about writing a book is you have to tell the truth and you have to go everywhere. If you're selective about what you pick, then your book will get attacked. So it's quite brave doing an autobiography.
Explain that to me, because obviously you're going to have to be selective to get it in a couple of hundred pages, because like you said, you could write thousands and thousands. So when you say it's got to be selective, it can't be selective. You're talking about some of Prince Harry's recollections or questioned. Is that what you mean? People will be going over it with a fine-tooth comb?
No, what I mean is, I'm sure Boris is the first to admit he's made mistakes. As well as the massive positives, no undenying, Boris Johnson was an extraordinary Prime Minister who got Brexit done, as he said, and the popularity he has not been seen since Blair and Thatcher, possibly even more in terms of his winning votes power. But along the way, and I'm sure he'd say this, he's made mistakes, he's had a very colourful private life. He probably won't want to go to some of those areas. But if you're going to do an autobiography, and we don't yet know how he's going to classify as autobiography. If he just says my political years in Parliament, then he can stick to that. But if he puts it out there as a fully blown autobiography, he needs to give the whole story.
So it's like being in court. It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth that people want from a book. I read, Jonathan, that he'd signed a 7-figure deal for his memoirs. Does that figure sound about right to you, or does that surprise you?
All 7 of those figures sound right to you?
I would expect someone like Boris Johnson should have got between $1 million and $2 million advance. I would not be surprised if there was a 2 in front of the advance. This is going to be an extraordinary book. It's going to be read all over the world. It's going to become a backbone political memoir to be looked at by students for many years to come. It will be serialised in many publications globally. So from the publisher's point of view, they're going to get a big return on this book.
Well, presumably they're going to say to him, look, you know, it depends what you're going to put in this book. If it's just going to be bland stuff that's already out there, we're not going to give you hardly anything, but we're only going to give you 7 figures if you guarantee to us there's going to be some juicy... Surely that must be part of the deal, isn't it? I can't believe they go into it blind.
I think with Boris, there's no worry about him being bland. There's nothing ever bland about Boris. Boris is going to say things that will be fascinating, provoke, challenge, create debate. It will be an incredible book, and whether you agree or disagree, it'll be compelling to read.
So if you were representing him for this book, what would you say? Would you say hold out for the advance? Do you get the serialisation, which I've seen so many people do in newspapers, where you do need some of those startling revelations to sell the newspaper? What would you be looking for now? What could he hold out for? Like you say, all the cards seem to be in his hand.
Now, the way a book works is the publisher takes the serialisation rights. So when the book is ready to be published, about 4 weeks before publication, they sell it to a newspaper serialisation. So the newspaper and the book publisher will select what comes out of the book for the serialisation to tempt people to buy the book. And then, so that's the point of serialisation, to market the book.
What would you estimate Boris's annual earning potential to be if he were to maximise it? If he were to say, right, I'm just going to focus on earning as much money as I can over the next year, what do you think his earning capacity could be, somebody like Boris?
My guess is someone like Boris could make between £5 and £10 million a year.
Gosh. And how would that compare with, say, you know, if you take another former Prime Minister, Liz Truss? How would it... I mean, how much different is it because it's Boris as opposed to it's any former Prime Minister?
I think anyone who's been a Prime Minister has got an interesting story to tell. Now, clearly, if the choice is Liz Truss or Boris Johnson, you're going to spend a massive multiple on your fee than you're going to pay for Boris over Liz. But Liz is still an ex-Prime Minister, and the fact she can talk about what it was like to be in Downing Street, albeit for a short amount of time, the fact she was one of the last people to meet the Queen, it's still an incredible story. It's a very short story. I think for Liz Truss, the interest in her being honest, if she's honest about why it was so disastrous, then it'll be fascinating. If she continues to try and gloss over what happened like she was some sort of heroine and got it right, which clearly she didn't, then she's going to have a short life. But I think she's probably bright enough with the passing of time to work out that perhaps she did get it wrong and talk about that.
Another thing, because I don't know about book deals, do you do an auction for a book? Could Boris Johnson have done an auction for a book deal? Sort of.
Exactly. I mean, his previous book was a company called Hachette. The 3 biggest book publishers in the world are Penguin Random House, who did Prince Harry's book, HarperCollins, part of the Murdoch empire, and then Hachette. And his last book was Hachette, so HarperCollins had clearly offered him more money and a bigger proposition to go with them. But of course, HarperCollins has got The Sun and The Times in their stable, and of course, Murdoch's got big papers all around the world. So Boris can have massive support from this book from day one.
Jonathan, Charlotte, that's why we brought you in today, to get the inside track of how much it's worth and how you do those deals. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we'll be taking a look at the biggest stories from the legal world from this week. But first, here are your latest headlines with Aaron.
It's 11:32. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. A senior Labour MPs described the Prime Minister as ridiculous after he was given a fixed penalty notice by police for failing to wear a seatbelt. The Shadow Financial Secretary, James Murray, says Mr Sunak has lost control. The Prime Minister has apologised for the incident, which happened while filming a social media clip earlier this week, and says he will comply with the fine. He was also fined last year for breaking lockdown rules in 2020. Dominic Raab has been defending the ex-Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi after fresh questions were raised over his tax affairs. Mr Raab told GB News he's confident Mr Zahawi's been transparent after he was accused of paying a penalty as part of a multi-million-pound settlement with HMRC. Labour have called on Mr Zahawi to explain himself. His team has been contacted for comment. Mr Zahawi previously said his taxes were properly declared.
Dominic Raab, who's being investigated for bullying, is passing judgment on Nadeem Zahawi, who's just had a £1 million fine for not paying his taxes on time. That pretty much epitomises this Conservative cabinet. When the Prime Minister came into office, he said that he would run a government that would have honesty, integrity and professionalism at its heart. None of those three things are happening today.
The co-founder of the bus firm Stagecoach, Dame Anne Gloag, has been charged in connection with a human trafficking investigation. Police Scotland say 4 individuals, understood to be members of her family, were charged on Thursday in connection with alleged human trafficking and immigration offences. A statement issued on her behalf says Ms Gloag denies the malicious allegations made against her and her family. Western allies have failed to agree to an agreement to provide German-made tanks to Ukraine, which are being urgently requested to counter Russia's planned spring offensive. The US and its allies met yesterday and did agree to send more NATO weaponry to Ukraine, but Germany is reluctant to provide its Leopard tanks or allow other countries to donate theirs, despite increasing pressure to do so. Ukraine's defence minister, though, says his forces will train on the Leopard tanks in Poland in what he claims is a breakthrough. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Aaron. Esther, more views?
I certainly have. Christine here on your prison FOI. She said, I'm absolutely flabbergasted by Philip's revelation. No wonder there's so many re-offenders. It's obviously a cushy number being in prison.
Mark disagrees, though. He said prisoners need keys for security when they're out of their cells, for food, work, etc. They have thieves for neighbours. Well, I can't argue with that. Going to prison is a punishment, the pain of which your presenters cannot imagine. Prisoners should be treated decently and with respect, supported and helped, not debilitated and destroyed, as you people seem to want. So there you go, Mark's got a different opinion.
And Paul here says, it's not surprising there are so many missed doctor's appointments. You try getting through to make an appointment, right? Well, it's just as hard trying to get through to cancel an appointment. You need to be able to get through. That was Paul there.
And Graham says, has there ever been a more two-faced, spineless politician than Starmer? This hypocrite will say anything to get anyone to get elected and to not upset anyone, as Groucho Marx quote summed him up perfectly. I've got principles. If you don't like them, I've got others. Keep those views coming in. We love listening to your views. Now it's time for our regular lawful news segment. Join us now is friend of the show, Andrew Eborn, to discuss this week's legal cases, and a really big one in particular.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's been an extraordinary week, hasn't it, with the Prime Minister talking about levelling up but forgetting to buckle up and various other things, and AI and all those sort of things. But one of the big things that's hit the headline is the Alec Baldwin case. Now, you might remember, tragic case on October the 21st, 2021. He was on the set of a movie called Rust. And tragically, one of the people, the cinematographer, Helena Hutchins, was shot by Alec Baldwin, who was handed a prop gun. He assumed it wasn't loaded, and somehow it got fired. And as a result of it, she died. And also another person, one of the directors, was injured as a result. What's happened? The prosecutors in New Mexico are now pressing criminal charges for involuntary manslaughter against Alec. And it raises all sorts of questions. The Actors Guild has come out and sort of said, well, hang about, as an actor, are you supposed to have responsibility for checking the guns and so on and so forth? And what's also happened is there's been the civil cases. So the husband, who's a lawyer, he basically sued for civil action for the claim. And he basically, that was settled out of court. But one of the settlements is that he is now going to be an executive producer on Rust. An extraordinary sort of way of doing things. But I think he's saying, which I understand is tragically, his son, or their son, who was 9 at the time, is obviously left without a mother. He wants her last piece of work to get finished as a result to deal with that.
I was going to ask that. So it is going to be finished and they'll have a say on it.
The bit I don't understand about this whole thing is why were they using a real gun on the thing? I mean, I remember when I first became an MP, we had a security briefing from the police and they had a whole array of guns on this table. Yeah. Some of them were real and some of them were fake. And the thing that astonished me, it wasn't that the the real guns looked fake. It was the fake guns looked real. I mean, you can barely tell the difference. Why do you need to use them?
And it's crazy. And it's actually worse than that, because they had not just dummy bullets, they had live ammunition as well. And there's all sorts of facts which are going to be coming out. And you might remember in July 1982, there was a similar case with the Twilight Zone, the movie. And that involved a helicopter crash. And tragically, Vic Morrow and 2 child actors were killed in that situation. And there was basically against John Landis, the famous movie maker. And also it involved a number of other people as well. And that was, again, a case about involuntary manslaughter. It was painful, and the media went all over it. It took 10 months of going to trial. And in the end, the jury said, well, it wasn't beyond reasonable doubt, and therefore they let them off. But the civil case, it was settled. It involved Steven Spielberg as well. But this particular set, they'd had all sorts of problems about citations and safety of the Bureau. They basically gave them the highest possible fine they could get was $136,000, almost $140,000 as a fine for breach of all sorts of regulations.
So going back to the Alec Baldwin Rust film,
yes.
They'd had questions raised, though, hadn't they, about the security and what was going on. So it wasn't something that came out the blue of it. It had been registered right the way along. So this, again, could have added into the decision of the court.
Absolutely. And so what happened, there were a couple of incidents. It's all coming out now, and this is what will happen with the trial. The judge, first of all, has to work out whether there's a probable cause to move forward with the trial, and that will happen. And then basically within 60 days, the whole process will start. It will drag on for years if it does. The evidence we've heard so far, there have been at least a couple of other cases on the set. On the October the 16th, somebody else inadvertently fired a blank. There was another case where the stunt double for Alec Baldwin, the gun accidentally went off in his hand. There's all sorts of questions about why there was live ammunition, what happened, the safety protocols and so on and so forth. All of this will come out. The tragedy is, as I say, a life has been lost. You have to raise questions about Alec Baldwin as an actor. Does that mean that actors have responsibility for checking the guns? They also, all of a sudden, have got him involved as a producer, saying he's got responsibility on the set.
Well, this is going to run and run, isn't it?
But will he go to prison?
Well,
I think that's what we want to know. Will he go to prison?
It's going to be interesting to see. Andrew, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Coming up, we'll be talking to a husband and wife who have been trolled unfairly online for the apparent difference in their looks. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 11:42. Now, do you ever wonder which person in your relationship is punching above their weight? Well, the author and podcast host, Hazel McBride, doesn't have to, as her social media followers have made it clear they think her husband is more attractive than her.
Oh, looks really everything. And is it anybody else's business how good-looking your partner is? Well, Hazel and Paul join us now. Hazel, hello. Great to have you here. How rude is all I can say. What sort of comments were people passing online?
It was very varied. So, there was a lot of women who were very supportive and saying, oh my God, don't put yourself down. You shouldn't say things like that. But, there were also a lot of men and some women who were saying, oh, she's below average, or, how did she get someone like that? It was very mixed.
How did it make you feel when you were reading those comments? Because, I mean, it can be quite hurtful, can't it, really?
I'm a very secure person, and also I think we're both very secure in our marriage.
Definitely.
And at the end of the day, I put the TikTok up, so I kind of asked for it, I suppose. But yeah, for people that are being maybe a little bit mean or negative, I think it says more about them than about me.
Yeah, I mean, looking at you, you're both attractive people, aren't you? It's not that one is and one isn't. You both are. I just wondered, Hazel, whether or not you played on this a bit, and maybe did you ever feel tempted to sort of put photos out there that make you look as bad as possible, just to really wind people up? Are you asking for it in that regard? Do you deliberately go out of your way to wind people up?
Well, that TikTok sound was trending, and we were at a dog walk, and yeah, I tumbled out of bed, hair wasn't washed, glasses were on, and I was like, you know what, this fits the audio, let's stick this up. But for me, I think there's a big narrative, especially around women, where it's like, oh, if you say that you're good looking and you own it, then you're overconfident and you're arrogant. But if you kind of put yourself down, then you're asking for compliments, or, I think it's one of those narratives that kind of regardless of what a woman says about her own looks and her own self, she's going to be judged for it.
Paul, how does it make you feel when you read and hear these things, people saying these things about your wife?
Yeah, it's not nice to read them, but I don't see it that way. So yeah, I know that we're good together, and that's the most important thing to me.
I'm just obsessed with it.
Did it bring out your chivalrous side? Did you feel, well, I love Hazel, we're together, and I want to protect her even more?
Yeah, I think it did. Yes, definitely.
I mean, I know how you...
Social media. He doesn't do much social media.
I know how you're feeling, Paul. And, obviously, Hazel, Esther suffers exactly the same problem that you get. Have you got any advice for her when she has to deal with all these people telling her how lucky she is to have somebody better looking than her as a husband? Do you want to give her some advice on how to deal with that, Hazel?
I think as long as you're secure in your marriage, it's fine. And I honestly take it as a compliment that people find him so attractive. Often when we go out, even in public, someone will be like, oh, where's Superman? And he doesn't see it. He doesn't see it in himself. And, he's the shy one of the relationship, which I find hysterical. So anytime someone gives him a compliment, I'm just like, yeah, let it boost his ego a little bit. It makes me happy.
Well, do you know what, Hazel and Paul? I think it's fantastic, A, that you're talking about it, you're on air, and the fact that you took it so well online, because there's so much trolling and, abuse online. And I do think you played up to it a little bit by putting your glasses on and not having your makeup on and saying, out there and proud. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, what a lovely couple, though, aren't they?
I totally think
they make
so.
a great couple, don't they?
And that's what I said. Nobody knows what it is and what those dynamics are in a relationship. Like she said, she's the outgoing one. He's really shy and quiet. You've never been mistaken for Superman or anything like that. He had.
No, man,
Paul had. you hadn't there.
Usually Hayley who hurls abuse at me. I don't need it from you as well.
Hayley, we're back in the studio now with the biggest stories from showbiz and sport. We've got the wonderful Hayley Palmer and Aidan.
The less wonderful Aidan.
You see, these digs are constant. But also, it's kind of good fun to have those digs and that little bit of joshing. I know most things are illegal now, but you should be able to still have jokes between partners.
I think Aidan's got some breaking news about the tennis.
Last few minutes, Andy Murray has sadly, his run at the Australian Open has come to an end. He's been beaten in 4 sets by Roberto Bautista, who 1-6, 7-6, 3-6, 4-6, but it was a gargantuan effort by Murray.
They all seem to be gargantuan efforts. All
Yeah,
these games even exhausting.
Well, even his opponent has just come out of a 5-setter as well, but he finished at 4:05 in the morning earlier in the week, begging the question. I mean, it almost took away from his achievement in some ways because everyone kept asking, well, why is it finishing at 4:05 in the morning?
Was there anyone left in the crowd at that time?
I don't think they let them out.
Oh, really?
It's not that easy to get out of a tennis match.
Do you know when you have a comedy gig, do they do that there? Lock you in, don't let you out.
They need to.
Not at all. I can pack an audience.
Hayley, what's happening in the world of showbiz?
Well, there is a new Love Island that has been commissioned. I had talked about it before, but it was just kind of putting it out there. But now it's definitely happening. It's called Romance Retreats, and it's for the over 40s that are single parents. And what happens is your children actually put you forward for it. I want to see this. I've got to say, I think I'm getting old because I'm not really enjoying Love Island this year. It's the same old thing. There isn't any good chat. They're just boring me. So I'm rooting for this. We want to see real people. We want to see real bodies. And we want to see people that have got life stories. Bring it on.
So it's all looks and no conversation.
Yeah, they say, let's go and have a chat. And their chat is so bad. It's like Aidan's chat.
But the jokes, are they better than Aidan's?
The jokes are better than Aidan's.
That's not a high bar. I mean, I didn't know people watch Love Island for the chat. I mean,
Well, they're always saying, let's go and have a chat, because clearly the producers have said that to them. But I think, they do look beautiful. But to be honest with you, Maya Jama looks so stunning. I think she just wiped the floor with everyone else.
Oh.
I mean, it's hard to beat what she looks like.
Now, I was interested in the BAFTAs.
Hi, Philip. Oh, Philip, who's that?
Oh, my word.
So can we start that again? I think that came in a little bit preemptive. A little bit preemptive.
They ruined my surprise for you,
They totally ruined the surprise, but here it is just for you from Hayley, Philip.
Hi, Philip. I couldn't resist. I saw Rachel Stevens from S Club at Cirque du Soleil at the Royal Albert Hall this week, and I thought, here's my moment. I went, excuse me, Phil's a massive fan. She was in the toilet queue, but I just had to, take my chance.
Let's not ruin the moment.
I think he might be silenced now, thank God, for the rest of the programme. I think it was well timed that we got that in a little earlier.
Did you promise her an autograph from Phil, did you?
That was...
exchange.
That was... thank Hayley. You've made my day.
That's OK.
You've made my day. All those insults...
Take it all back.
Rachel Stevens saying hello to me. I mean, my life's complete now.
Right, moving on to sport.
Yeah, we've got Liverpool
He won't be
versus...
able to say anything.
No, he won't. He's nil by mouth, isn't he? 12:30, Liverpool v Chelsea. It's been branded, you have to excuse the word here, El Crapio, because it's been, we know the Spanish game, El Clasico. Liverpool v Chelsea is 9th against 10th. They're having the worst seasons in years, these two. They're going underway at 12:30. We had some interesting... West Ham Everton as well later today. The loser of that one could get the sack. So that's David Moyes at West Ham and Frank Lampard at Everton. David Moyes has a big connection with Everton. It's possible, even if they lose today, that he could end up as Everton manager this time next week and go back there. He spent 12 years back there between 2002 and 2013. So that's possible that can happen. And then tomorrow, Crystal Palace, Newcastle. Interesting transfer news as well. Leandro Trossard joining Arsenal from Brighton, £21 million plus 7 in add-ons. And then we've got the boxing tonight as well. Interesting. It's 10 o'clock, the ring walk. Liam Smith against Chris Eubank Jr.
That's going to be a massive fight.
There's been a lot of chat on that beforehand, hasn't it?
They've both been doing. We can't repeat much of it here.
No, but it's bad chat or back chat or whatever. But the BAFTAs, how about that, Hayley?
Yes, they're coming up soon, aren't they? But what I want to talk about is Kylie Minogue, because she is doing very well for herself at the moment. Apparently, she has made £7.7 million for putting her name to a bottle of Prosecco. And apparently... every 1.5 seconds, someone is actually sipping the Prosecco. Has anyone tried it? We don't actually have.
I'm more of a champagne man,
So
really.
she's not like sort of the Brad Pitts of this world. Some of them have actually got sort of vineyards and are producing their.
Yeah,
she's not done that. She's just attached to her name. Well, that's a lot easier way to do things, isn't it? Don't do the hard work. Just put your name on a bottle.
You understand celebrity in a way that I don't, Hayley. Why? Although Rachel Stevens, I will make an exception for, as you know, but. Why does somebody buy a bottle of Prosecco just because it's got Kylie Minogue's name on it? I mean, I find this quite...
It's like if Rachel Stevens had a Prosecco, you'd be walking along Esther and you'd be like, oh, I think if I treat myself that...
Well, if I could
buy a Magnum.
If Rachel Stevens came with the bottle, I probably would. I'm not sure I'd buy it just because it had a name on it.
Yeah, that bottle would be slightly more expensive, wouldn't it? Yeah.
How long has this been going on then? How long have these sales been? Has this been going on for that last year or so? How long?
I believe
She must have
so.
sold a lot.
Quite a few celebrities have been putting their names to bottles of Prosecco. I haven't actually seen it myself, but apparently you can get it in Asda, Morrison's. It's about £12.
Kylie's been sort of doing this for some time. She's got sort of bed sheets and sort of various other things. She's put her name next to quite a few things like that, and she's done very well for herself in
That's
this
what
area.
I mean. And I think maybe when you are a celebrity, your manager just kind of goes, well, do you want to do this and do that? And you go, yeah, a bit of extra cash, why not?
And Dolly Parton's had her 77th birthday.
Ah, big Dolly fans here on the show. And yeah, she was 77 years old. She's got out a new single to give back to her fans. Also got a new album coming out, and apparently Cher's going to be on it. And Pink.
No.
There we go.
You're a Dolly Parton.
I love Dolly Parton. I think she's got a cracking sense of humour. I mean, put aside, obviously, sort of legend in music, you know, her songs, the words, everything. But I just think she's hilarious. She's got fantastic sort of comebacks and all the stuff she's done for charity.
Yeah, I know, exactly, yeah. Did you mention Pink as well, though?
Yeah, Pink's on there as well.
Yeah, I like Pink. More my era.
I don't know what you're saying now. Dolly has been around Beret.
Yeah, I know. It's got a great work ethic. I want to mention the BAFTAs here, Hayley. This is I've got my beef here. I was looking at the full list of nominations.
There's no Rachel Stevens on there.
No, I looked twice to make sure. And I mean, most of these people I haven't even heard of. The bit I couldn't understand for there's all these categories, thousands of categories. I mean, it's difficult not to win something at the BAFTAs. There's that many categories.
Yeah.
But the category I couldn't work out for the BAFTAs, the British Academy Film Awards, was Best Film Not in the English Language. I mean, why do you have a Best Film Not in the English Language at the BAFTAs? It seems bizarre. Is it only just me that thinks that's...
Well, they're looking, I think, out of the world. They're looking globally. Look at other things that could win an award. I'm guessing it's that rather than it was a British film which was made abroad. Could it have been a British company supporting something elsewhere? Like
is Elvis up for an award?
Elvis
is.
Elvis is up for Best
and
Film.
I think Austin Butler is as well, and he needs to be.
Good. That's my go-to.
Yeah.
That is definitely the one I would be putting my name to.
We enjoyed
that
Elvis.
was fantastic. I thought he was a great actor. Yeah. Hayley, thank you very much.
Just quickly, Novak Djokovic is through in 3 sets.
Say that again.
Novak Djokovic is through in 3 sets at the Australian Open, so he's advancing on to possibly his 22nd Grand Slam. We never know.
Fantastic final words to you there. But that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for getting involved. Don't forget, if you want to be in Speaker's Corner, get involved. Email us gbnews@gbnews saying you want to be on the show with Phil and Esther. As I said, we'll be back next week. But up next is the wonderful Alistair Stewart with Friends. See you.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a freezing start out there for many of us, a widespread frost, fog patches as well, but dry for the vast majority, with some more sunshine to come for England and Wales. However, a change is on the way for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That change has already started taking place overnight. These weather fronts moving in from the west, bringing milder air, but also, well, increasing the wind, picking up some rainfall, and leading to a generally breezy and damp day in the northwest. Those outbreaks of rain pushing into eastern Scotland, southern Scotland during the morning. The fog in central and southern parts of the UK slow to clear, but eventually once they do clear, beautiful spells of sunshine once again for much of England and Wales. 5, 6, 7 Celsius, similar to Friday's temperatures. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, well, it's turning increasingly windy, and with the cloud, the wind, the spells of mainly light rain, it's going to feel quite cold, even if temperatures are technically higher than they have been for the last few days. Gales around some western and northern exposed coastal areas in Scotland, and then heavier and more persistent rain arriving during the night tonight. But with the cloud also edging further eastwards overnight. It's a frost-free start for Western England, for Wales, for Scotland and Northern Ireland, even if it is a breezy, cloudy and, in places, damp start to the day. A complete contrast for the East Midlands, East Anglia, the southeast of England. Here, frost and fog once again. But once the fog clears, plenty of sunshine actually towards the southeast. It's another chilly day, 3 or 4 Celsius typically, whilst across the rest of the UK, well, the further northwest you are, the milder it will be. 10, 11 Celsius possible for parts of Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. Further outbreaks of rain at times, mainly across the north of the UK, increasingly cloudy elsewhere, but we keep the relatively chilly air in the southeast.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day